Legend of Total War here, and today I'd like to welcome you guys to my Total War 3 Kingdoms review. Now this review is coming out a lot later than everyone else's review, and there's a good reason behind that. I made some unfortunate decisions last year, and I didn't think about the consequences of those actions and how it would impact on my audience, who rely on me and trust in me to do these reviews in a timely manner. I let you guys down last year, and I'd like to apologize for that. And I'd also like to apologize to Creative Assembly, who was probably hurt most by the decision that I made. In many ways, though, the blacklist has actually been the best thing for my channel, because the biggest thing holding my channel back was actually myself. And the blacklist was the catalyst that I needed, or the kick in the ass that I needed, in order to take a good look at myself and see where things were going wrong, and make the change that I needed. And in many ways, I'm continuing to do so going forward. And I'd certainly like to seek reconciliation, despite the fact that, overall I've had a net gain over the entire experience. But overall, it does sometimes leave a sour taste in the mouth. I think reconciliation is the best thing for everyone in this case. But anyway, let's talk about Total War 3 Kingdoms. Now, if you're sitting there wondering, why should I listen to this guy? There's so many other reviews, why should I listen to Legend of Total War? Well, here's the thing, I've actually discovered a number of things in my short time playing this game, which is roughly around 70 hours of game time, that I don't think any other outlet or content creator has mentioned. And it's due to the fact that when I've been playing this game, I haven't been playing it to finish the game. I've been playing it to test it. I've been pushing this game to its limit. I've played it on normal difficulty, I've played it on legendary difficulty. I tested out cheese tactics, I tested out regular tactics. I've done things that I don't think anyone else would think of doing, and it's allowed me to see what this game is truly capable of in terms of its AI, economics, and how the game can function. So by the end of this video, you'll get a pretty good idea as to whether or not you want to purchase this game. I will not at any point in this review tell you whether or not you should or should not purchase this. I have already decided whether or not I like or dislike this game, and I will give a numerical value out of 100 to what I think this game is worth, and compare it to other games in the franchise, to other Total War games. So with that being said, I want to move on now to the most important aspect first, which is the artificial intelligence. So I'm going to jump into a battle and explain some things that nobody else has told you yet. This section of the video here will be mainly covering the artificial intelligence, the AI in the battlefield, and this is probably one of the most important things. And I think a lot of people are going to be basing their decision on whether or not they want to purchase this game based on the AI. Now, in the lead up to the release, we all saw the preview builds, and the AI didn't look very good. Now, having played the game now, both on normal difficulty and legendary difficulty, I can now explain as to why it looked so bad in the preview builds. I didn't think that they would be able to improve the AI given the short amount of time with the delay, and in many ways, they didn't. This here is on normal difficulty, and they will do stupid things such as waste archer's ammunition shooting at incredibly small targets, which is a complete waste of ammo. When I first played the campaign, which I played a normal campaign for about 30-40 turns before I basically got tired of winning what should have been unwinnable battles with absolute ease just by sending a general up there to waste their ammunition. Archers are some of the best units in this game. They can absolutely melt infantry units and cavalry units super quickly. They're a must-have in all of your armies, and if you can simply just mitigate the AI's ability to even have archers, it just made the whole game feel pointless. But then I played it on legendary difficulty, and the AI's behavior changed. So this here is the exact same battle, except I've cranked it up from normal difficulty to legendary difficulty. The archers still have their full amount of ammunition, and we're going to just do the same thing that we did before. On normal difficulty, we were able to waste their ammo, but this time, it doesn't work. The AI actually prioritizes certain targets, and it recognizes that shooting at such a small target here with inaccurate weapons is a waste of that ammo. If I was to bring up a unit in testudo formation, they would not shoot at it. I've had situations where I've had my battle line, and they've been shooting at me, and then I suddenly went into testudo while they were shooting at me, and they would change targets. This would only happen on the upper difficulty settings. This is the first time we've seen such a pronounced difference between the behaviors on lower difficulty settings and higher difficulties. Now, on the higher difficulties, the AI still get shitloads of stat buffs, okay? That's to be expected. The AI is not going to be Alexander the Great level competent, but at least we're starting to see different behaviors depending on the difficulties. This means that they're actually working on the AI. Now, is the AI on the hardest difficulty particularly good? You know, going up against me, I was able to outsmart it the majority of the time with no real problems. And I think the majority of other players out there will be able to do so as well. But it did seem like they were pretty competent on legendary difficulty. Pretty incompetent on lower difficulties, but on legendary difficulty, I was pretty satisfied with the degree of difficulty. And that finally explains as to why the preview builds looked so bad. They weren't playing on legendary difficulty. They probably weren't playing on very hard difficulty. They were playing on low difficulty settings, and the AI was programmed on training wheels, essentially. So, as terms of the AI, it gets a big tick from me, because I think this is a big step in the right direction. Now, I want to move on to siege battles and start talking about them. So, just talking a little bit about the sieges now. Just want to be fairly brief with it. There's two types of sieges. There's the major settlements, which if they're tier 4 and above, which they can go up to tier 10, they'll have walls. If they're below tier 4, they won't have walls. If the other minor settlements, they don't have walls, but they've got various different layouts. There's a fair number of layouts for the minor settlements. Now with the major settlements, it's pretty much just a square in every situation. It's not particularly large. And I don't think it doesn't really get any larger the bigger the settlement goes. So it's not like Rome Total War where it ends up taking up the whole bloody map and you're just squished to the edge of the map. But overall, the sieges are better than Total War Warhammer. But are they better than, say, Total War Attila? No, they're sort of somewhere in between. The AI is passive on the defense, and on the attack, they really derp out quite a lot. Which kind of contradicts what I said about the previous statement about the AI being good. It's good in some scenarios, not so good in the others. Siege AI has never really been great, so... You know, is it better than other games, Siege AI? Yes, but it's not great. Now, in the lead up to the siege, what can you do to prepare for it? Not a whole lot. I mean, you can build either a ram or a sap point. There are no siege towers in this, and just like in Total War Warhammer, and I guess in Empire Total War, everyone carries their own ladder, or it's a rope that they jump up and climb up the wall with, which is fine, but we've seen, like in Rome 2 and Attila, having loads of different types of siege equipment, and even though personally I never really used them that much in the campaign, it was good to at least have those options. So it does feel like that there really hasn't been that much effort put into the sieges, I think. They're okay, but probably neither giving them any points nor subtracting any points for sieges. They're just a bit meh. That's all I really think about them. Alright, let's now move on to the campaign map, and I'll start talking a bit about what's going on there. Okay, so this here is a campaign playing as Cao Cao. It's on legendary difficulty, and it's on around turn 71. So what I'll do is I'll talk about various mechanics from here, starting with diplomacy. So how good or bad is diplomacy in Total War 3 Kingdoms? It is excellent. I really can't fault it. If I was going to fault it, I'd have to be really nitpicky, to be honest. But basically, going through it just briefly, there's two ways to sort out diplomacy. There's the regular sort of negotiations, which, standard to previous Total War games, you click on the faction you want to negotiate with, and then there's various things that you can pick. Then there's Quick Deal. Quick Deal is great because it is exactly what it says. It's quick. It's quick, it's easy to use. What you do with this, it's the opposite. You click on the deal that you want to make, and it'll let you know who's willing to accept it, which is so good, especially when establishing trade agreements. And when you actually do get down to the negotiations, it's additionally really clear, because it's not just a case of they'll say yes or no, but it actually gives you a breakdown as to why they're willing to accept or not accept certain things. So in this case here, you know, he's willing to accept it because he recently lost a battle and our military strength is much greater than us. But he also hates our guts, but not as much as he's, you know, willing to accept it, because the balance of power shift is just out of his favor. But we can see here we've still got plus 35, so we can score a little bit of payment out of him, right? But alternatively, you've got people that will just, under no circumstance, negotiate with you. And that way you just know, don't even bother with them. And then there's people that'll say maybe. Now the thing is with maybe, it's a case of where the negatives outweigh the positives. And you can try and sort out a payment or whatever to try and make it work, and it'll tell you how much it's worth. Or you can just make this work, and it'll give you the exact amount that you need in order to make it just a complete even thing. But that being said, we're giving a territory here away for peace. You may not want to accept it. There's certainly other ways to go around it. Like, you can actually sell food, which is great. It's such a great addition to this game, because if you're ever out of food, being able to buy it off someone would really help you out. But I've actually found that it's actually really good to sell. In fact, it's so good that I had such an abundance of food at one point, and Yuan Shu over here was just poor as fuck. He was just out of food, and he had this settlement here. And I was like, I'll just see what I can get from him at by selling him some food. So I sold him, what, 20, 30 food over a 10-turn period, and I managed to get this entire region off him. You know, and all I had to do was give him some food for a short amount of time. Now that might seem like, oh yeah, now there's loads of cheesing in diplomacy, but you gotta understand as well that he was out of food, he was starving, and you can check to see when they're out of food. So people who are desperate for food are more likely to negotiate for food. People who are poor are more likely to accept monetary deals. And that's really reasonable, because it's supply and demand. They need something, you give it to them, they're willing to give you something that they probably don't feel like they need, but you actually want. It's really good. Now, the other thing I want to talk about is alliances, right? In previous Total War games, I've never bothered much with alliances. Alliances usually break down to the case of they either drag you into wars you don't want to fight, don't back you up in the wars that you want to fight, and end up taking the settlements that you were aiming for while not backing you up in battle. Overall, really nuisance people. I usually just stay away from them. But in this, it's much different. You'd really want to get a coalition early on, because the main thing is that the AI, at least on Legendary difficulty, is very aggressive on the campaign map. If you are seen as weak, if you don't have enough people backing you up, they will swarm you. And so getting a coalition nice and early, what that'll do is just make sure that people are a little bit more cautious before declaring war on you. They'll still do it, but you'll be able to drag in other people to come and help you. Now, they'll drag you into certain wars, but with a coalition, it's a non-binding contract. You don't have to accept it, and at least you've got the sort of overall strength, because their strength is added onto yours. If we have a, let me see if I go to negotiate. If we go here, it'll actually add up and say their strength is, you know, inferior, similar, or superior to yours, and then it also adds up their allied strength. And that's really cool. Now, I'll tell a little bit of a story in terms of this particular campaign, what happened with alliances. And I thought it was indicative of AI cheating, but also intelligent at the same time. So I started off the campaign, I had a pretty strong start here, and I conquered a bunch of settlements, and I formed a pretty strong friendship with Liu Bei early on. He asked for a bunch of things that I was totally willing to accept and was willing to pay a lot of money for it. And so it just, as these deals kept coming through, like I sold him food, so on and so forth, he became more and more green. And I was like, okay, let's see if we can form a confederation. And he was totally down for it. In fact, he paid me to join the confederation. And it was a pretty peaceful coalition for a little while. And then he wanted Kong Rong in, but of course he has to ask my permission. And I was like, sure, why not? The more the merrier. And so we dragged in, didn't drag in Kong Rong. He came into the coalition, and we had a merry band of 3, and nobody could really touch us for a while. And I expanded down south a little bit, and everything was fine. And then all of a sudden, Duchy of Wu over here, he decides that he doesn't like me, and he vassalizes Liu Bei, which drags him out of my coalition. And I was like, well, if he ever declares war on me, I'll just destroy Liu Bei, even though he likes me. And then it was just me and Kong Rong. And then all of a sudden, Kong Rong got vassalized by the Duchy of Wu. Now, that's still the case here. Those two are still his vassals to this day. So that was kind of indicative of AI cheats, because it was difficult enough for me to get a vassal here who was super weak, and he was able to vassalize Liu Bei, who had enough strength, who did not need to become someone's vassal. So it seemed a bit bullshit in that regard, especially considering the distance between their borders. You'll notice that some factions will just accumulate vassals like crazy fast, especially on the upper difficulties, and that can feel a little bit like bullshit. Now, because this is a very diplomatic game, I thought to myself, okay, two can play it that way. So he's in a coalition with Liu Bei, or Bao, or however it's pronounced, right? And he was really friendly towards me because I was supplying him with food. I've been basically the food market in this campaign. So I was supplying him with food, he really liked me, and he was in a coalition with someone who I thought was really threatening, and somebody who I didn't really want to go to war with because I was busy fighting up here. He wouldn't negotiate with me, so I negotiated with Liu Bei instead, and got into the coalition. And so that's why now, he actually likes me because we're part of the same coalition. We've been fighting the same wars that aren't really on my border, so it hasn't bothered me at all, while I've been out here expanding. So the coalition, at first, totally broke down, but then it worked out in my favor in the end, to some extent, because I've had free reign now to expand north with these guys protecting the west for me. Now, I suppose the big problem with diplomacy is the fact that some of it is locked behind the noble ranks. I don't particularly like that. I don't particularly like that you only get like limited amounts of trade slots. I mean, we kind of saw that with Empire Total War, kind of, with naval trade slots. But I kind of understand why it's there, because trade is very powerful in this game. Okay, now that I've mentioned trade, we'll talk a little bit about that and the economy system and how it functions overall. So there's a tiny little thing over here, and that shows the trade influence. Now, trade in this, it's not very fleshed out at all. It's probably the most simplistic we've ever seen it. We don't acquire a certain amount of any resource. When we gain a minor settlement, every minor settlement has a resource attached to it. There's no minor settlements that doesn't have a resource. So if we look over here, we've got Toolmaker, and that gives us access to tools. Now, getting a redundant access doesn't do anything. So if you've got the Chen livestock farm, there's no real value on getting the Yangzhou livestock farm because you've already acquired it. It's just whatever the building's worth after that. Which is okay, it's just not fleshed out. Now, that doesn't mean that trade isn't valuable in the game. It is very valuable. We're making 3,500 in trade with 5 trade agreements, so it's really good in terms of money, but it's just really simplistic. There's just not much depth to it. And I always lied to the system from either Empire Total War or Medieval 2, how trade worked in those. I just thought that they were far superior to this. This is just there's just nothing to it, really. It's very simplistic. It took me all of 5 seconds to figure out, and that's just the end of that. Then we move on to the actual settlements themselves and how much money they make. So, population returns in Total War 3 Kingdoms, which is great. It's great to see it finally returns. I've been asking for this for ages, so I don't want to hate on it. But at the same time, it is a little bit dull. Because in Rome 1 and Medieval 2, the economy system of settlements was based around your population. The more people you had, the more taxes and trade that it would benefit. And then buildings would provide a modifier. But in this, it's the opposite. Buildings provide the base income. So you can see here, 130 base income from peasantry. And then population provides the modifier. And I just don't think that that's a superior system. In addition to that, the way population growth works, it's very static. In that there's various things that increase it by a set amount. It doesn't grow organically. You can have settlements potentially have 0 people in it, and then because they starve or whatever, and then once you fix the problem, because of the buildings or whatever that you built, suddenly it grows by 100,000 a turn. It's just weird. It's just really weird how it works. So it's a bit nonsensical. It's functional, but it's nonsensical a little bit. So I really think that they should rework this a little bit more, maybe in other Total War games. I think it's fine for this one. Look, to be honest, I'm just happy to see it return. And it certainly feels good to have provinces knowing that at least there's people living there now, as opposed to it just being buildings. But I would have liked them to go a little bit further with it, but it is still going to get points from me. Overall, the building system as well is really dull. They've basically taken it straight out of Thrones of Britannia, in that you've got these minor settlements here. They're just more like assets. At least they've got garrisons here now, and pretty significant ones as well. And the siege battles that you have there are reasonable. So you can actually defend them in this game. It's not just a case of, walking over to all the minor settlements and just taking them as you see fit. And you get all the build slots from upgrading the main chain. These here don't get any customization. If it's a farm, it'll always remain a farm. There's some situations where you can have, like, at the end of the chain, there's 2 variations, but there's very minor difference between them. All the real customization happens at the major settlement. Now, it comes down from being at level 1, you get 1 build slot, all the way to tier 10 with 6 build slots. Now, in Thrones of Britannia, they had 5 build slots. So it's a little bit more expansive than that. But if we have a look at the overall build tree, it's really simplistic. It's mostly just about stacking buffs on one another. You don't really build barracks, so it's like Thrones of Britannia as well. Your troops are available from any region. It's just that these will, like, give you reduced recruitment costs in certain provinces, or they're needed to research certain technologies, but they don't function like a barracks in the same way as it did in previous Total Wars, which I don't really like. And we'll get onto the recruitment system a little bit later on, but overall, I just think that the building system is really dull. I didn't really become very excited looking at this. It's just overly simplistic. Alright, so over here I want to talk about the reform tree. This is the technology for Total War 3 Kingdoms. It looks pretty messy at a glance, right? It's very pretty, but it's very messy. And I would have preferred it to just be a little bit more organized. Now, the way it works is a whole bunch of different branches. And there's you can complete a branch. There's only like 4 items in each branch. Some of them only have like 1 or 2. And that's fine. But like I said, it is very messy. Now, you get one every 5 turns. And there's no way to augment that. There's no ancillary that you get, or no trait that you can get that's like plus 5% reform rate. Every faction reforms at the exact same rate. So you'll never ever be more or less technologically advanced than anyone else. All you can simply be is differently specialized. So everybody will finish the tech tree at the exact same time. Don't have a problem with it. It's just a bit dull. That's all. Very simplistic. And in a game where they've made such big leaps in some areas, this is just a sideward step. It's neither good nor bad. It's just a bit simple, and I was expecting more. That's all. The next thing I want to talk about is the Undercover Network. And I gotta admit, I really haven't enjoyed my time utilizing this mechanic, and I would just prefer it actually just to be removed from the game. It's very rare that you'll actually hear me say something like that. I'm usually for more mechanics over fewer, but I just think that this is a boring mechanic, and it relies very heavily on RNG, and I just haven't enjoyed it. So the basic gist of it, how it works, is that you select a candidate or someone from your ranks, and you send them off to be a spy. The higher the rank, the better they are, sort of thing. And they accumulate cover and undercover network over time, and the more you kind of use that as a currency to do certain actions. But there's a pretty good chance that he'll get discovered and get executed. And getting your spy discovered and executed is probably a good way to make an enemy out of somebody, and getting declared war on where previously you may not have. Of course, if you can get lucky and they manage to accumulate enough and actually, by some random chance manage to become a general, or even more so the faction leader, then you can do certain actions to manipulate them. But I didn't get to the point in doing that in my campaign, and I think it'd be very rare in any particular campaign that would actually happen. So I guess it's a case of, when it comes down to the spy, you really can't trust my review alone, and you're going to need to collate a whole bunch of reviews to get an idea on whether or not the Undercover Network is actually good, because I feel like it's something that you're going to have to play multiple campaigns, actively utilizing it to get a full experience of it, because it seems like there's a lot of things that could potentially happen, but it's based off random luck chance, and I don't have 7 months to bloody, check this out before doing the review. Another thing in terms of spies is that I do prefer the old system. I thought the old system was fine. It was just unbalanced, that's all. In where you recruit a spy, and then you send it off into enemy territory to do certain actions, and I thought that was fine. Now, what I would often do with the spies is basically have it remove the fog of war for me, because one thing that is a really big risk, especially on legendary difficulty, and this is a case of hamstringing the player as opposed to actual real difficulty, is that the AI doesn't see fog of war, so it can see everything that you're doing unless you're in ambush stance. So if you want to send an army in here, let's just say there's 2 armies right there. You use up all of your movement range, and then oops, suddenly there they are in the distance. Right, but I can't really move any further back. And over the next turn, both of them attack you and wipe out your army because you outpowered. And there was no possible way for you to prepare for that. That is irritating. Now, that doesn't necessarily happen very often, but it can happen, and there's nothing you can do about it because you can't utilize intel on the map. And I think reintroducing spies into Total War game in the previous capacity, it should come back that way. That's what I think. So overall, I'm not giving this particular mechanic any points because they've stripped one mechanic to give back something that seems good on paper, but it was a totally forgettable mechanic in all of my campaigns. It was not an enjoyable part, and in my campaigns going forward, I won't be utilizing that mechanic much at all. Only use it as a bit of a side joke, and oh yeah, we'll put someone as a spy and we'll just see, but don't rely on it. So it just seems a bit disjointed from the rest of the campaign, which isn't good. It should be interconnected with other things, like the way diplomacy is. It's connected to everything. Anyway. Next thing I want to talk about will be the family council. Okay, so this is a summary of all of the characters that are within my court. So there's Cao Cao the leader, there's our faction heir, various positions and administrators. Now, I don't think it's that urgent at all to put people in certain positions, because when you do that, it increases their upkeep cost by a significant margin. Like, I'm pretty sure her as a chancellor, it increased her upkeep cost by like 250 or 350. Now, she increases income from peasantry by 15%. And it's a good way to make sure they're satisfied. But you run the risk of a civil war, which I haven't had. And you get situations here where it's very messy in terms of who likes who. Trying to get them all to like each other is a real pain in the ass. Like, no one's particularly happy, nor are they particularly unhappy either. So it's a bit confusing, and as I've said, you could potentially remove all of these from the campaign, from their positions, and it just wouldn't really be that much of a problem, because there's things on the campaign map that'll increase satisfaction. So, for example, this Pencheng Temple here, owning this, and I don't know how many of them there are along the map, but this is just one example. It increases plus 10 satisfaction faction wide, and that's really cool. And that made me not really need to worry too much about these positions. So I don't know, like, I'm mixed thoughts about it. It's cool to have the positions, but I don't know, at the same time they don't do much. And you've got this as well, and you can invoke council, right? And it gives you missions based on what you've got available, or like who's actually there. And most of those, like, it's okay. Like, it'll give you 5 turns of no corruption, construct a building from administration office. Like, they're really simple missions, but given the amount that you pay them, is it really worth it? I don't know. It just seems a bit like time wasting, really. So I would say it's not a bad mechanic. It just doesn't have much impact. Then there's also the family tree. The family tree is pretty easy to read. It's good. It's a family tree. You can see here that this here is his distant cousin, and that's his wife, and he's got 6 sons, I think. I don't know if any of them are daughters, to be honest. I think they're all sons. Yeah, I think they are. I'm pretty sure he could have daughters, and if you get a daughter, you can they can still be a general, or you can marry them off. And you know, you can do various things here, marry them off. It's a functional family tree. It's not bad at all. No complaints. And then there's here where there's the giant mess of characters, relations, and to be honest, as soon as I looked at this, I was like, oh, I ain't looking at this. So, and then I just turned it off and I never came back to it, because it's like ticks and minuses, all this stuff all over the place. So I just information that it's actually there. But I think a lot of people will look at this and be like, information overload. I guess when it comes to the relations as well, it's like, I've had bad, like, if I go to one of my armies,
Bend.
right, these guys have been fighting together for ages, and this guy here dislikes both of them, right? And he's still 100% satisfaction.
The population is growing.
So it just didn't matter. And like, yeah, he hates the people he's around. So it just didn't matter. Now, it might just be because I haven't played long enough in the campaign, but this, in both of my legendary campaigns, I've had people who are, you know, not all ticks. Another thing to consider as well is that they're, like, Cao Cao and Johnny Dunn here, they were together in their army, right? And they were like oath-sworn, and then all of a sudden one of Cao Cao's traits changed, and then they hate each other, right? And it just seemed random, and they never lost a single battle together, and they were oath-sworn, and then all of a sudden they were rivals, and I didn't do anything to influence it at all. Can you do any like character actions? Like, can you say, you know, give this person a gift? I mean, you can give him a promotion, but that just increases his satisfaction. That doesn't actually do anything. There's no actual actions that we can do. It just tells you what it is. What it's based on is the random traits that they accumulate over time. And you can see here, it's like, commends perceptiveness, commends flexibility, resents discipline. It's just, okay. It's like rock, paper, scissors. Rock, paper, scissors. Just loads and loads of rock, paper, scissors. Eventually, you're going to get some bad combinations here. Like tick, 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 cross, cross, cross. It's a bit weird. And there's not much you can do about it. So, I didn't really enjoy just basically watching these guys unfold, disliking each other, despite the fact they were fighting together side by side. It just felt weird. Next thing I want to talk about is the army recruit system. So click on a city, raise an army, and then there's 5 different generals to choose from. And it's color coordinated. You got green, purple, red, blue, yellow. So let's pick 3 different generals here. And of course you can see that some have the cross, some have the tick. You should try to utilize getting the ones that are actually going to be positive, because that means that they've got friendships within the army, and they may develop friendships or hatreds as the campaign continues. And they come with automatic retinue. Now, the recruitment system is so that all the basic units are available to everyone, but once you start getting more advanced units, they're limited based on rank and type. So as this guy ranks up, he'll get access to higher tier blue tier units, so like missile units. And he has his unique unit, which is artillery. No one else can get access to the artillery or the crossbows, as far as I'm aware. Now, if we have a look over at this dude here, he's got access to 3 units of cavalry, so one of them's the blue unit's not able to utilize. And this guy here, he can get access to superior green units, and so on and so forth. Pretty self-explanatory. It's okay, but it's a little bit restrictive. I do prefer the older Total War style, where you recruit a general and there's a barracks in the area and you recruit from whatever's available in the barracks. Even the Thrones of Britannia system, where you recruit from a manpower pool, even if it's from a global recruitment pool, I think is actually better than this. Because once you get on the battlefield as well, because of the way the UI is structured, like, it's really messy. And I just don't like the system, pure and simple. I prefer the older system. I think that this just takes away a little bit of the control from the player. I don't have a problem with like manpower limitations or anything like that, but it's just overly messy. I just didn't like it. Okay, one of the last things I want to talk about is duels. Now, one of the big selling points of this game is dueling. And what we'll do here is we'll showcase a duel. So that enemy commander over here is the beginning of a Cao Cao campaign. We hit duel and we can see that this guy is willing to do it. If he wasn't willing to do it, it would be grayed out. It'd either say he doesn't want to duel or can't duel. I believe only the strategists can't duel, everyone else can. Generally speaking, the green dudes, so the champions, are the best duelers, with the exception of Lu Bu, who is the best dueler in the game. There are some red duelers that are better than green ones, but most of the time the green ones are the best. Anyway, so we hit this. We can see here that the relative strength is negligible, which means we're probably going to win. Although, really, if it says negligible, it really is definitely going to win. And if we win, we get 25% of our hit points back. Now, you can use this to, knock off the enemy general and restore the health of your guy a little bit, provided he doesn't, take 25% health. Anyway, let's get the duel started.
I must prevail.
And I'll talk a little bit more about it. So, that guy's going to come in. Now, in the preview builds, we used to see that there was a big collision bubble that would form around them. Now, that doesn't happen anymore. There's still a little collision bubble, but it's not like a giant one. So, they'll go off and do their thing, and they'll have abilities that you can use. So, this one here will do 3.8k splash damage, right?
Go for the legs.
So, which isn't a lot, but I believe there's an ability that can do like 15,000 damage. It did say here that our strength versus him was negligible, so he's much weaker than us. But one thing that you can do, you can interfere in a duel, which is alright. But one thing that you can do to interfere without actually interfering is using your buffs. So I could do this, and it will actually increase his melee evasion there. So you can totally stack a whole bunch of buffs on him. Even if he's not participating in the duel, he can be improving them. So that's just something that you can do. Now, what do I think about duels in general? Honestly, I'm not a huge fan of them, and I can understand them being in this game, so I don't think it's necessarily bad. But I really don't want to see them in a Total War game. I do not want to see this in Warhammer 3. So I feel like it's fine that it's in this game, but just this game specifically, I don't want to see it again. Just to reiterate that point. I feel like watching these duels is a bit boring. And that the AI, it does make battles a lot easier because the AI always makes a bad decision when it comes to dueling. On the times where the AI will actually have a better duelist than you, you can simply tell your guy, just don't duel him, right? And even if the AI have really shit duelers and you've got really good ones, they'll still risk it. They'll risk their general's life, like they did here. I mean, we absolutely slaughtered him. And that just makes this battle here super easy. And he's at full strength right there. So, it's okay. I don't love the mechanic though. Now, there is another thing here while we're in the battle that I want to talk about. Conceding defeat. And rematching, okay? This, on Legendary difficulty, should not be there, okay? I don't mind if it's there on all other difficulties, but rematch should not be available on Legendary difficulty, okay? It completely defeats the purpose of being on Legendary difficulty. This needs to be grayed out on Legendary difficulty, I think. That's just my personal opinion. It's just something that I thought was really, really weird. Because part of Legendary difficulty is like, whatever happens, happens. You just can't re-roll the dice over and over again. It just, like I said, defeats the purpose of it. So in summary, how do I feel about Total War 3 Kingdoms? Overall, I do like the game. I think it's been a good addition to the Total War franchise, and I've enjoyed it. Is it a Total War game for you? Hard to say. It depends if any of the mechanics that I've mentioned that I like or dislike appeal to you. Obviously, I don't think it's a perfect Total War game, nor do I think it's the best Total War game ever released. I do think it's a really solid release that has pretty good performance. It runs very well on my computer, at least. And this is all on the highest graphical settings and on extreme unit scale. And I've only have one crash to desktop after 70 hours of playing it, which is pretty damn good. But I do think that there's some improvements that need to be made in campaign design. And I think where this game fails the most is in terms of the battles. I think the AI is fine, but there's just not that much going on with the battles. After you've fought a few battles, they all start to feel the same. And as I've mentioned before, duels I just don't feel anything towards it. I'm very apathetic. To me, it just seems like an easy way to get ahead in a battle. If I've got the advantage, and if I don't have the advantage, then I just don't let the enemy have the duel. It seems a bit too simple to me. And watching the duels, it looks cool for like one or two of them, but it just doesn't really do it for me. But like I said, overall, a good Total War game, 78 out of 100, and I hope that helps you make your decision on whether or not you want to purchase this game, if you haven't already. Anyway, that's the end of this review, and I'll see you next time.